think it's time. Welcome, welcome. It is that time. This is kind of exciting. We are sewing a pair of jeans this morning. Not we, I guess there's no we about it. I am sewing a pair of jeans this morning. And our purpose for doing this is that visualization really helps confidence. It really helps enable you to see how simple the process is. And this is really the only format that we can bring this to you. The purpose and the reason it came up is because we had reached 10,000 viewers on YouTube, and we said when we got to that point we wanted to do something to celebrate and say thank you to our YouTube customers who are loyal and watching, to say thank you. I wanted a sale. I got outvoted. I thought, let's just have a little weekend sale. I got outvoted, and I got outvoted to the point where I'm here, and this is a good reason why you should run your own company and own it all completely so that you can't get outvoted and you won't be sitting here. But this is kind of fun. I think I wake up and many Saturday mornings and so the only difference is you all are sewing along with me, and you can. Purposely earlier this week, on Monday of this week on YouTube, we posted a segment of the Jeans, Just Jeans DVD where I went over fitting. So the goal was to put that up and have you all watch the fitting, do the fitting, show you the pattern we were using, etc., so that you could get to the point where here we're sewing all of these today. So that's the goal. Obviously, the format with our YouTube is we can ask questions as we go along, and I think that's the best part. So we'll try to make this as much as if you were literally present here, except we couldn't fit you all in the room. So this is probably a positive. And typically I'm in my home. This is where we do the webcast. And I don't cut out in this room. I have another room where I cut out, but because we're doing this, we're going to do this all in one room. We are recording this, so it will go back up on YouTube so that many can see it. I literally know from emails that we are live around the world, and that's kind of fun because what I have learned is I thought the problems were isolated where I started in Texas, and then I found out they were all over the US, and actually now I found out they're all over the world. And so I think that really points to our education and that we need some improvement. So our goal at Silhouette Patterns is to educate correctly. All right, you ready? And you can ask questions anytime. We got Brett monitoring the questions. We got a couple other people back there, and we're going to see what happens today. So let's do it. If you're ready, we're ready. All right, so I'm going to start out. I chose Carolyn's cargo pant, 3500. The reason I chose that, because I got several emails saying, well, how come you did that? I did that because for two reasons. It is identical fit to the jean 3300 Lana's jeans. They're identical, and so 3500 is really a more complex pattern, and I went for the more complex. So hope you're not mad at me, but I do think it's important to everything that's done on 3500 is done on 3300. So I think it's better to do the more complex and then work it backwards. So my fabric that I'm working with today, I have washed it. I actually washed it in Coca-Cola. I don't know if you guys remember. I'm going to just start as if you all have never watched, okay? Coca-Cola is a washing in Coca-Cola, just regular Coca-Cola, not diet, just regular Coca-Cola, not Pepsi, Coca-Cola. In a can, whatever, one can. I have a front loader. If you have a top loader, you'll need more. You'll need a quart, I don't know. But anyway, no soap, and it doesn't come out sticky. I just took my fabric. This is the reversible tan white. And we've got a lot of great fabrics up there that would be applicable. This particular fabric, even though I did this last week, I prepared all this, I did all this last week, the fabric sold out this week. The last 2 yards sold out yesterday. So that's almost impossible to believe because we had a lot of it. But anyway, it's gone. But the reversible white, I picked it just so you could see. I don't know that I would have picked it otherwise. Well, no, I don't know. I really like this tan side. I'm really looking forward to having a tan pair of pants. But there's a reversible navy must. There's all kinds of great denim up there. And the other pair that I didn't finish the waistband, but this is the same pattern And this is that linen, that wax linen, and they're just beautiful. They're just really, really beautiful, and I'm making them for fall. So, and just wearing them with a dark brown sweater, and they're just really, it's beautiful to work with. So there's lots of fabrics available, but I washed my fabric. Again, I washed it in Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola softens the denim, and then I didn't put any soap, just the Coca-Cola, and again, that was to soften the denim. And then I put it in the dryer. So full wash, just how I normally would wash, regular dryer. It did not shrink at all, actually, but you know, you should still do yours. And I do find that sometimes it is a little bit different from machine to machine to machine. Because I want to use the selvage for this pant, I'm going to just lay that band out, not necessarily cut it right now, but at least lay it out so that I can see where it needs to go, so that it doesn't shift. I'm going to put a little ruler on there just to hold it in place, and then come back to, because when I cut out, in general, I cut my largest pieces first. Because we did sell out of this fabric, I really tried to give up as much of it as I could, and still have enough for what I needed. So, you know, I might be a little close this morning, but I think we'll be fine. Alright, so I'm just going to start cutting. What I use, I don't use pins, but I use weights. And I would always recommend that you do cross cuts. And cross cuts are simply when you get to the edge, you go past, and then you go the other direction. My only sacrifice this morning, you know, besides my time, is I don't get to watch a movie while I'm sewing. But that's okay. Yeah, you guys, that's your job, is to entertain us. That's a good point. Thank you, crew. Alright, so when I cut these pieces, that's the front. I usually stack the front together and then I stack the back together. We did this webcast at 3 hours. I'm not even sure why, because I've never timed myself making a pair of pants, so I can't tell you that. I don't know how, I mean, I've never timed myself. So it's certainly not about the time as much as it is just simply about, I think, getting it done. I do think there's something to be said for sewing in sections. And I know that I do a lot of cutting out and you know, don't necessarily do anything else except cut out. Jeans have a lot of little pieces. Shouldn't say a lot. But the front on this pant has two parts. It has the top of the pant, top of the front and the bottom of the front. So again, with my pieces, this has a welt pocket in the back. That piece is fairly large. So out of my scraps, I have a tendency to, again, cut my larger pieces first. On the pieces that I have so far, you guys, you really don't have to, I mean, gosh, how do I say, this is bias, so as long as I have it on the bias, I'm okay. Bias does not need to be measured because it's such a small little piece. This is the back of the welt is what I'm cutting. It's such a small little piece that it won't make a difference. And when I cut these little pieces, I have a tendency to just stack them all together so that I know where they are. I'm going to pull back some of these pieces that I threw away because they're useful, especially for the fly. The only thing when you're doing this pattern that you really need to do on grain is the back, because the front has several sections. Grain line, the only time grain line actually really matters is if the pant is in one piece, and then the leg has to be on grain, and you'd have to measure. But because of the different pieces, I have options as to where the leg's actually going to go. When you're doing your fitting, that's a good question. Thanks, Brett. When you're doing your fitting, you've got to include the yoke, and the reason why is in that back yoke, which is this piece right here, there is a lot of the whole purpose and the whole reason it's curved is there's darting in there. If you take it and put it against the pant top, which is this portion right here, you can see that those pieces, there's your darting. The absence of that paper is where the dart is. So as you're stitching this, it's kind of like a princess seam. The darts are being incorporated into that seam. So when you are doing a muslin, you absolutely have to sew on your yoke. Clarify the yoke concept. In the pattern making process, when the yoke is made, the darts, let's take a regular pant. If you have a regular pair of pants, you have 2 darts in the back on each side. So a yoke would cut through those darts. So you can't just delete them. You can't just eliminate them. There's actually a rule in pattern making where you can't just delete darts. You have to move them, you have to convert them, you have to do something with them, and if you don't, then you sacrifice your fit. So if I have 2 vertical darts right there, what I do is I move them horizontally. Again, there's no bust point, so I have a lot more I have a lot less restrictions on what I can do with darts. And so I move them, I cut to the yoke line, and then I cut from the side seam to the dart, and I close up the dart, and it opens up the dart in the yoke line. So I actually move the darts into the yoke line. So by virtue of sewing that yoke to the back of the pants, I'm creating the darts. Well, if the darts weren't correct in the first place, then the yoke line's not going to be correct. And how you find that, or how you observe that or know that, is you're going to have gaps along the back of your yoke line. So I can take a dart if I'm fixing it, and I think I showed this in the YouTube web video, where you pinch out those darts along the yoke line to fix that, to fix the curve, and those pinched out darts will correct that curve. Does that make sense now? Is that better? Alright, there's my waistband. That's last, so we can put that away. And again, when I cut out, I have a much bigger surface. There's been so many years. Now this is my back piece right here, and I am going to, you guys are going to think I'm terrible, but I don't measure it. I just make sure visually it looks like it's going straight, because in this particular fabric, the denim, and I could do either right side out. I'm actually going to do the tan. The tan is going to be outside because I want to wear it with a white top. So I can see the white, and the white grain is so strong that I can visually just see where it is going up and down this leg. So you can measure it. I am measuring it just from experience. I'm physically not measuring it just because I don't need to. But it is important that it's straight. It's very important that it's straight, or else that leg will twist. Am I laying out the pattern what? Sorry? I am laying out the pattern in one direction. I have a tendency to do that anyway. I think, unless I'm probably not one to ever really chintz on fabric. I think that came from my mother, because my mother was always one to see how little she could buy and make it work. And so she was always creating plan Bs, and I don't like plan Bs. I really I really want it to work the way I wanted it to work, so I would rather pick up a little extra fabric if I need to make my plan work the way I wanted it to. Alright, so that's part of the back. I'll put the back in a different pile. Alright, so while I'm not timing myself, I do think it's important as we go along to kind of take note as to how long it's taking. I don't care that we take notes, but I want you to recognize basically that it can only take so long to cut out, you know, however many pieces you have. It can't take, you know, all afternoon. I had a lady one time say to me, and I think it's true, she says it takes her longer to clear the dining room table than it does to actually cut out. And I like cutting out. I'm not sure why, but I just really enjoy the process. I really enjoy sewing. I think it's amazing to take fabric and really fashion it into anything we want it to be. It's just a wonderful process. It can be frustrating, I totally understand that, but it can also be really joyful as we learn new rules and understand what we're doing. Alright, so there's 3 back pieces. The reason I also chose this is because of the seams. You're going to have a lot of control as you go to fix, you know, different things that you want to fix on the pant. There is a center back seam that goes along the pant, and I think that even though I don't use that to fix anything in fitting, because you wouldn't have it on a regular pair of pants and you don't need it to fix anything, I think that as you are new to sewing or new to fitting, you'll feel a little more confident having that back seam. Alright, so what I have left, I'm not doing belt loops on this pant. Even if I tucked a shirt in, I just wouldn't do belt loops. So I deleted those from cutting those out. That's not necessary. And the pattern I'm using has been fitted on myself, absolutely. This is my jean pattern, so I have made a muslin, absolutely. Yes. Of getting the pattern, what's the process of making the muslin? Alright, so what I did is I took the pattern or the tissue, whatever you want to call it, and I made up a muslin. I used a muslin that was very similar fabric. This has a little bit of stretch to it, so I made up fabric that had, again, very similar fabric. You want to look something that's inexpensive, that has a very similar feel to it. I fit myself, I draped myself. I took those changes back to this pattern, and I chose to because I thought it would be easier for you to see than to see my fabric on this paper. So generally when I make a muslin, I'll leave the changes on those muslin and I will not bring it back to paper. But I did this because I felt like it would be easier for you all to see those changes. So you can either use the muslin that you've actually draped as your pattern, or you can take it back to the paper with what I did in this particular case. Alright, so that is cut out. I've also got here a pair of jeans that I made a little while ago because I think it's really helpful. You know, I hadn't really thought about this before I started this process, and I'm going to tell you something, in needing to do this or in having to prepare for it, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy just making sure my answers are responsible and correct, and making sure I can help you as much as I can. So it helps me to literally put myself in your shoes and kind of go through the process. But anyway, what I realized, and I haven't ever said this to y'all before, is when you are having something made in a factory, what they have is they have the cut pieces. Usually places don't cut and sew. Usually you have a cutting house and you have a sewing house. But anyway, the cut pieces arrive, and what they ask for is a sewn garment. This is actually their guide sheet. And that's not to say that it's not specified as to how it's done, but the actual garment is what they use as a guide sheet, because it's much easier to see. Like, for instance, when there's differences, that a pocket is here on this side, it's not on this side, if you actually have the garment. And so, and this is 3300, this is Lana's jean, but I just thought I'd mention that because I notice as I sew, I actually hang up a garment if I've made that pattern before, or even if I'm, like, for instance, even with jeans, if I have a pair of jeans that I like, I have that hanging up visually so I can see the process going together. So I would recommend that. Again, visualization is a really strong part of this whole process, and I think I'll never forget when earlier, the first blouse I never made blouses, and I just really felt like, hold on, we'll get this. I'm gonna move this out of the way because I don't need it anymore. Can you get that? You're okay? And I never felt like I could make a blouse. I always felt like it was just way, way, way too hard. And I'll never forget the first time I saw a blouse being made. I remember thinking to myself, I can do that. So I think it's really important to visualize, and so that really is the goal here. Okay, we're going to switch to the sewing machine. We've got it all cut out, we're good to go, and we're going to sew. I think every time I write a guide sheet, I am very aware that y'all have never made this garment before, and so I think I try really hard to make it as easy as possible and to format it to where it's as time saving as possible. I think that's really important as well. Okay, so my machine is on. I have turned it to a 3.0 stitch. The reason I chose 3.0 is because it's a denim. It's fairly heavy, so it can take a little smaller stitch, 3.0. I wouldn't get 2.5, that's just too small, it's unnecessary, but I don't want the denim to have little gaps, between the thread. Denim is a strong fabric and it can handle a little smaller stitch. 3.5 would not be wrong, it just really doesn't make a difference there. Whether you start with the front or the back doesn't make a difference. If you start with the front, you do the fly. If you start with the back, you do the welts. So I don't know, do y'all have a preference? I think I'm going to start with the back. I don't know why. I think I'm going to go ahead and just construct the whole process of the back and do the welts. Now, the only difference, like I said, this is a little bit harder than 3300. The jeans would have back pockets, and patch pockets are not difficult. We'll actually do one patch in the front because of the little coin pocket. So you'll see how to do that. But the welts I felt like were kind of fun because they were so different. I'm going to take my front pieces and put them over here, and then my back pieces are here. I am going to use both a sewing machine and a serger. I've got the serger right here. It's typically not where I have it, but simply because of room, I needed to do it. I've cut out my jean to where I've got right sides together. And I started with 2 yards. When I cut the fabric, I used 2 yards, and I'm going to save that piece because it's got my welt marking on it. The rest of my pieces I'm just kind of throwing on the floor to be cleaned up later, right? I really like this pant. I should tell you a little bit about the pattern. Just simply that You know, I'm going to have a problem with this mic. Hang on just a second. I usually don't have a mic on me when I'm sewing, so I can roll really freely. So I'm going to have to watch that. I'll just be careful. This pattern, the reason I did it in the first place was Escada. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that line. Escada is just a really beautiful ready-to-wear line. And I found this pant, and it has a beautiful seam down the back. I mean, it's really just, I just love the pattern. I just love the shaping, the fit. I love everything about it. So it is a cargo pant. It came after the jean, so I used the jean. I used the same fit as the jean, and then just cut it all up, sewed it back together. Four thread. Did I narrow the pant legs? No, I didn't change the style of the pattern at all. Alright, so I am going to flat fill seam these. So just in this particular case right here, I'm going to press the seam to the bottom. You'll kind of get an orientation as to where I am here just a second. It's kind of hard to, right now the pieces are so little. But I will make sure you're orientated here in just a bit. When I do a flat fill, I don't use a double needle. You could, but I don't. I'm not sure why. So whatever time it takes me to sew this jean, you figure you could do it twice as fast if you used a, you know, a twin needle. Somebody said, is it because you don't want to change out the needle? I don't think so. I just don't think, I don't know. I don't know why. Haven't psychoanalyzed that part of me yet. When you do this, this is kind of a mock flat fill. What you do is you take the seam, and I pressed it down because seams go to the bottom, and then I just did a double row of stitching. The very first row is almost an edge stitching. It's just like a 1/16 of an inch, and the second one is a 1/4 of an inch. What I do is I use, you know, I'm using a Teflon foot as I sew, and I've got little notches. In fact, I've got 3 little different places on each side of the needle where I can mark it, and so I use them, and I found that in using them I really like them. I like where they sit, so I do that. The first stitch I use, and it's right, you know, it's just right on the edge of the fabric. And then you all need to tell me what you can see and what you can't see, or what you need to see, or, you know, let us know, because we just don't know what you can see. Go ahead, what? Well, they seemed in the, yeah, yes. But okay, here, let me just kind of show you where this is. That's the hip line right there. So on the side of the pant, and I did this purposely, I did center back seam first so that you could get somewhat of an orientation. This now sews to here. So I had to do that flat fill now so that I can serge this together. So all I'm really doing here is creating the back of the pant. And I have to create the back so I can do the welt. Is that alright with everyone? Look ahead when you're serging, especially a long pant leg, and be sure that you kind of move to the bottom because the machine itself will not sew the same, and you want to be sure that it is pulling the layers in. So as I align that bottom, you can see that that machine just pulled it right in. And since I'm going to have to press this before I stitch it, I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. The only thing you have to be careful of is that you don't sew these upside down. Trust me, it's happened. Just watch your pieces. Number them on the wrong side, do whatever you need, you know. The two pieces of pattern are different shapes. So I've got, you know, that's why I'm watching the edge to be sure that as I send them through, I'm sending them through at the right amount. And then once I stitch to that seaming, then you can go ahead and do the length. I am going to do jean seams. Hang on, I am doing jean seams, but the way I do them is how I'm going to show, is how I did this one right here. See, that's a jean seam right there. So you've got to create the seam. I mean, you can do them any way you want. Everybody has different ways of doing them. This is just what I do is I serge the seam, and then I press it to the middle, and then I'm going to do a double top stitch over that. The flat fell machine that they use in the factories is an actual separate machine. We don't have a flat fell machine at home. So there's different ways we can create it, but we actually don't have that machine. And so any way you do it, it's going to take some kind of finish, and it takes more than one stitching. So it doesn't make any difference how you do it. This is just how I do it. I prefer scissors, but it doesn't make a difference. You know, basically in the factories they use massive rotary cutters, you know, but they also have really good compression on those fabrics, and so I think a rotary cutter makes more sense. But you know, the only reason I never developed that habit of using a rotary cutter is because when they became really popular, my children were small and they were dangerous to me. They were you know, they were just really dangerous. So it's not something I created, you know, that I decided to do. Okay, so you don't want to do at this point, this is in the guide sheet, you don't want to do a center back flat fell yet, because you're going to sew on the yoke, and that is a continuous seam that goes from yoke to pant back. So don't do that one yet, but I am going to do the two long ones along the back. And so you're going to pick your spot, and you know, all I'm doing is following the seam. I'm actually stitching through 3 layers to create this flat fell, and this is, I think, where it's fun to have picked out your thread color. I made a pair of jeans for Brett. He's sitting here and he will remember. He said to me, I hope this doesn't embarrass you, he said, Mom, they look like girl jeans. And I said, they don't look like girl jeans, they look great, they fit great. I mean, he loved the fit, but he didn't like the pant, and I said, well, if you figure out why they look like girl jeans, and you can tell me. So it finally figured out that it came down to thread color. So I had just picked a thread color that he didn't like. And even if you let them pick the thread color, you have to be careful because they haven't necessarily done it before, and they might pick the wrong thread color. So I told this story to somebody, and they said, just get a felt tip marker and just go through and color all the thread differently. I thought, it's not a bad idea. So I do think thread is an important issue. Probably one of my favorite purchased jeans is a pair of Ellie Tahari jeans, And I love the thread color that Ellie Tahari uses, which is actually what led me to use this thread color on this pant. He uses a real taupey color. And I just love the look that it has. So even though this is kind of a beige color jean, I used a taupe thread. And I love the way, I just love the color combination. I think it's so pretty. And if you're a quilter, this is like quilter. It's just, you know, long, mindless sewing, these sections right here. Yes, that's a rule. Seams get pressed to the center. Horizontal seams pressed down, vertical seams pressed to the center. That is a pattern making rule, sewing rule, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, just use a zigzag. You can either buy a pair of pinking shears. I don't know how common or popular that is anymore. You can buy a pair of pinking shears, or you can just okay, I'm supposed to repeat the question. Sorry, you guys. I'm sewing. I can't do all this at once. Are we supposed to, if they don't have a serger, you can zigzag the seams, or you can buy a pair of pinking shears. I would imagine if you don't have a serger, you know, I didn't have a serger for years, and I kind of just had it figured out what I did. I had a stitch on my sewing machine. There's a lot of decorative stitches on your sewing machine, and they are very nice. I mean, you know, the fact that you don't need a serger makes it look pretty, but it just finishes the edges. There's no visible place on this jean where that serger is going to be. On the outside. There will be on the inside, but not on the outside. I am. I'm using a 3.0 top stitch for the... I'm using a 3.0 stitch for the pant, yes. There's no standard. You know, if you guys look at jeans, especially today, jeans are such a common garment. They have penetrated every single person in every single facet of life, and you will find there are lots and lots and lots and lots of different options. I'm telling you, of all the patterns that I researched and all the information that I found, I pulled together you know, kind of the most standard information that was out there. But boy, I'd turn around and find another pair of jeans, and there was some exception to that. So, you know, I think jeans for the most part these days are, you know, the motto behind them is to personalize them, make them yours. So I would encourage you to do that. Alright, so let me show you what I've done here. We have the back of the pant made up, and these two have been flat felled along with this angular seam over here. This angular seam will meet the angular seam on the front, but it's just the long seam down the back is where we're at. Okay? And I'm going to put the yoke on now, and you don't have to. You could go ahead and do the you could do the welts, but I would prefer to get all the top stitching done on the back before I do the welts. I think then I just know once I do the welts the back is done, and that's just preference. It doesn't make any difference. How do you get the what? The V in the back. I'm not sure of that question. You guys are going to have to clarify that question. A V in the back of jeans? I mean, it's either built into your... I don't know. Sorry, clarify. It should be above the knee. You know, if you notice on the pattern, when the V comes together is where the patch pocket goes. I'm not doing that patch. I'm not doing the cargo pant pocket on the outside. I'm doing the welts on the back, but not that cargo. Again, it's just top stitching. But that, if it's too low, it's going to be silly. The bottom of that pocket should about hit the knee area. So you want to make sure that it does that, or else it'll make you look short. Alright, so this is the yoke that I'm doing. And the only thing it is on the center back seam, you want both. I'm going to show you this pair I have. See, this is where it's helpful to look at a pair you have. The center back seam is just all needs to go one way so that you can actually flat fell that seam as well. So the yoke and the center back seam, the seams of those two need to go the same way. And I'm going to send them to the right. Because that's the jeans that I've researched and done, they're all done on the right. I did pin this so that I would make sure that my seams aligned. So this is what I'm talking about when I say to you, the dart is in there, because you can see the curve now of that band. So instead of the darts going this way, they're built into the seam right here. That seam needs to be pressed down because it's going to be flat felled also, but you know, seams go down. Horizontal seams go down, vertical seams go to the center. That's just a rule. Sewing, pressing, pattern making, all of the above. When the seam is at the center, it can go to the right or the left, but generally it goes to the right. In jeans, it goes to the right. That's correct. Well, that's all styling, you guys. That's all styling. So if you want a more exact V, then you put your pieces together and then recut how they are. That's all styling. The shape or the entire yoke itself is all styling. There's no right and wrong on that styling at all. Well, the top of the yoke would follow your waist. And usually the top of the yoke follows the shaping of the bottom of the yoke. But again, that's all styling. But you can't go crazy up here because it's got to fit the body. It usually follows the waist. It's got to follow the waistband. Okay, so now what I'm doing is, generally the yoke is stitched over the vertical center back seam. So I'm stitching the yoke seam, I'm flat felling it before I stitch the vertical. And again, I use my same two guides. So there's really, you know, I guess when you're talking about flat felling or stitching seams, there's really not that many seams. Because if you were doing, remember I said this is really harder than the jean, 3300, I wouldn't even have had those two back seams. I would have only had one piece in the yoke. So all of that work that I've done to this point to create those three pieces together would not even be done. We would just be starting now on the yoke, attaching it to the jean itself. But I will tell you that I love this back. I love this jean. I hope you will too, because it's just a beautiful back. It is the same. It is the same, yes. Most of what I did on men's jeans, on the men's pattern, I found there to be no difference in the men's jean. The women's fly a lot of times is done like the men's fly. I'm not going to, because there are women's designers who actually do change the direction of the fly, but there's lots of women's jeans out there that have the fly going in the same direction of the men's. So just a heads up on that so that you can be aware. Okay, so there's the back yoke, and then I'm going to do the back vertical, the center back seam now. And because what you'll see when you do this is that it continues right down along through the center back seam. I think too, there was, jeans in my studies goes all the way back to Mr. Levi and how they were created and how they, were first even came to existence. And a lot of it, when we go to do the flat fill seam, the center seam, or the inseam, I don't mean the center seam, the inseam is actually done on a flat fill. So the reason for that is because of the rigidity that was needed for those pants. They needed to hold up, they rode horses. That inseam was the one that had to be much more durable. Well, that's true in all the classic jeans that you find. In anything classic, you'll find that that is in fact the jean, the seam, the inseam is done with a flat fell, which is how I do it. But I'm going to tell you that in looking at a contemporary jean, a lot of them have cut that out. Now to me, that's what makes a jean look like a jean, but the option is yours. They're your jeans. Yes, it would be a mock flat fill. You can't, the only way you can do a flat fill seam is with a flat fill machine. I mean, for me, my background is industry, so you don't have a machine to do a flat fill seam. It does it automatically. It takes the two pieces of fabric together, wraps one around the other, and stitches two seams at one time. It's all done at one time. But we don't have anything like that at home, so you have to do, everything you do would be a mock. Regardless of what you do, it would be a mock. In my mind, anyway. Okay, so there we have it. We have the back. Isn't that pretty? Okay, so questions on the back? I'm just using regular thread, regular normal thread. Again, that's preference, but what I notice is the jeans that I like, ready to wear the jeans that I like, they don't have a heavy top stitch. To me, heavy top stitching comes from it looks masculine, and it also is a real denim-y look. I have a tendency, I've noticed, to like a more dressed denim, or a dressier, I don't know if that's the right word, but a little bit dressier. So the back pocket is 5 inches, and it's 2 inches down, well, it's 1 3/4 inches down from the yoke. So it's not, it is straight along the yoke. The yoke line is not straight, but you don't want your pocket to be straight either. So I measured down the same amount. It is marked on your pattern. I just wanted to make sure you saw that. Okay, so I put 2 pins where I want that yoke to be. The front, that's the front, these are all the front pieces. This is my welts. So again, fronts with fronts kind of help, so that as you go through all these pieces, it makes sense that they go together. So this is my welt pocket piece, and this is my, I think that it's fun to me. I guess one thing I like about sewing is there's pieces, and I've always loved jigsaw puzzles. So I kind of feel like I'm doing a jigsaw puzzle where I'm putting all these pieces together, and what you end up with is this finished puzzle. So now I'm working on the welt, and I have a tendency to stitch these ends twice. So I just stitch them down. I don't back stitch, but I guess it's like a back stitch because I stitch them down, then stitch them again. This is a single welt pocket. This is not a double welt. You could do a double welt. Most of pants back, though, have a single welt. So I'm going to show you how to do that. The welt itself, as you saw, I cut it on the bias. It doesn't have to be measured exactly, simply because it doesn't make that much difference because it's such a short bias piece. So even if it weren't exactly bias, it would still play the role of bias, and the role of bias is to simply give a little bit while the hand's going in and then retract itself back to its original shaping. Hey, you guys, just so you know that there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Everybody trying to do different roles. So if it comes up and there's a question and we should miss it because somebody's doing something else, just ask it again. Okay, so I've got my two little welts here, and I'm just going to fold and turn it to the inside because you get a really beautiful sharp point. And I'm going to fold and just hold that together, and then flip this over. It's a 90-degree angle. If it doesn't come all the way out, just work with it in your finger until it will lay completely flat outside and inside. So do both of those little welts. Okay, so just fold it like that, reach your finger in and hold it, and flip it over your finger, and then just hold it like that and do the same thing. And you'll see that those will flip out, and you can see those corners are just perfect. If that little corner right there does not come out, I work it out with my fingers, but if you don't want to do that, you can just take a pin and it'll just pull right out. Don't put anything up in there because what you want is that inside to lay perfectly flat, and if you push something in there, a lot of times it'll make a little kind of a knot at the corner. So just keep it nice and flat like that, keep it nice and flat like that, and I'm going to press those two, and then we'll sew those, we'll put them on the back. What stitching? Stitching on the inside? Oh, the top stitching? Can they see that? There's just two rows. One's right on the edge, and then one's right a 1/4 inch in from the edge. It's pretty. It's really pretty. I hope you can see that. It's really pretty. I love this thread color with this pant. Okay, so I'm just giving those a little bit of a press before I put them on, and we're ready to do welts. Any questions up to this point, or anything you want to see? As it goes together, you can see less and less, so let me know if there's something you want to see. And because I'm just going to do one pocket at a time, there's no right side or wrong side to the pocket. So the welt actually, because this is a single welt now done, not a double welt, I put the welt between those two pins. And I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch from the edge of the welt. Now I start right on the edge of the welt. I'm going to give it a little bit of a back stitch, but I want that to be right on the edge. Remember, my edge here is finished. In a double welt, my edge is not finished. And again, I use my foot as a guide to keep me at a 1/4 inch. But don't go past the edge of that pocket. What's going to happen here is the pocket itself, I'll kind of show you. And then you can clip your threads because you've back stitched. I'm on the right side of the pocket. I'm on the right side of the pants. It would be on the top. The pocket's folded in half, so it's going to flip up and go like that. So the pocket is actually down. I don't mean the pocket, that's actually the flap. It's the welt. And then you take this portion right here, this is the pocket, and you put the right side of the fabric against the right side of the jean. So just like when you're stitching a double welt now, you're going to make another stitch line. It's going to be a 1/4 inch from the edge as well. They're 2 1/4 inch, so you get a 1/2 inch width strip. And again, you want to start and stop the length of the pocket. You don't want to make it longer than, because you're going to cut to these points, and if you make it longer than, your opening will be longer than the welt will cover. So you just want to stitch the same length as the pocket. And you'll know your machine, you'll know how many stitches it'll take forward before it starts to go backwards. And that's kind of a real pleasant thing to be working on a machine you're familiar with. Alright, so we have to do this twice because we got two pockets, but keep in mind that on the back side you can see that there's my two, or can you see? I mean, I think this is important that you see this stuff as we go. Yeah, let's... Okay, so on this side, which is the right side of my pants, this is literally the back side of my pants, my welt is down and my pocket is up. And I've got 2 rows of stitching. They're 1/4 inch from each edge. Then on this side, if you look on the wrong side of the pants, you've got 2 rows of stitching, and that's going to be a 1/2 inch apart from each other. And you notice they're 2 straight parallel lines. They stop and start in the same place. Can they see that? Okay, perfect. Alright, so then we're going to go ahead and cut, and this is your great excuse to buy a perfectly brand new pair of scissors, because you've got to get them to where they cut nice and beautiful. I'm going to cut right to the tip, right to the back stitched point. You have to stitch to the back stitched point, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, because you can't stop short of it because it won't pivot, and you can't cut through it, or else you're going to get a hole in your pocket. So this is a really good time to be careful. And if you notice that when I cut, I stop about 1 inch before the edge, and we did a YouTube video on this on welts. This is the exact same. The only difference here is I'm actually doing a single welt as opposed to a double welt. And the only difference is where I place the welt. When you're doing a double welt, you're doing the same exact thing twice. When you're doing a single welt, in this case, the welt has to be finished, the length has to be finished, it has to be on the bottom, then the pocket is going to fold into the hole that I just cut. So you'll pull this through, and I think it's easier to operate on the inside. You'll pull it through. You can see all these cut edges will automatically turn to the inside because they will pivot beautifully. And I'm going to take the bottom of the pocket now and stitch, cover the hole. That's the concept I've used on the single welt. It's the same concept I'm going to use. There's the hole. I'm going to cover it, and when I cover it I can't see where to stitch on that side, so I'm going to stitch on this side, and I'm stitching the exact same place where I stitched before. The only difference is I'm over stitching where I'm just stitching the welt and the pocket itself, and then I'm going to come up on the welt where I've back stitched and then stitch along where I've already stitched. So this is a really simple pocket to be done. It's just a couple steps, and it really gives a beautiful effect, and I'll show you that effect here in just a minute. Alright, now I've done that, I'm going to go to the right side of the pocket. You don't need to press this pocket during the entire process. You can see the insides there, and there's my flap, and my flap will actually turn up. Isn't that beautiful? It's so pretty. So what I'm going to do now is the sides of the pocket. That's all done. You can see in there it just turns up. The flat fill seam goes right through my pocket. It's just beautiful. This will fold up, and you can see my big fat triangle is there. It really helps when you stopped 1 inch from the edge and made those triangles really long. I think it helps to see it again now, because you'll kind of look for certain things that maybe you've had problems with. So notice I pulled the edge of this pocket down, and then I'm just going to stitch right along the edge of that big fat triangle, and that will give me a beautiful edge to my pocket. So when I come back and look at this, you can see how perfect. It's just gorgeous, and that's because your seams are all just overlapping one another. On denim it's really easy to do because denim is a very firm fabric. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to turn this up, and you can see there's my big fat triangle now. Pull that down. That pocket underneath sometimes will have a tendency to flip up. This should actually be flat, so just kind of watch that. And then I'm going to turn it this way so that I can sew just over the edge. And I'm going to get the edge of that big fat triangle and stitch it down. And each stitch that I make kind of secures the stitch prior, if that makes sense, because in some cases I've got stitches that are really just to the point. They're back stitched, but they're just to the point. So when I come along with these stitches, what I want to make sure they do is I want to make sure they overstitch the previous stitches. Now I think the good news is, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to serge this edge. You could have serged the pocket beforehand, I just didn't. but you want to do something to finish those edges. So again, if you don't use a serger, use a zigzag stitch on your machine that finishes those. No, I don't, you guys. I don't have any more of the fabric available because, isn't that pretty? And if you can look underneath, it's just perfect. Because most of the fabrics I buy, most of them are all designer ends, and so once they're gone, they're gone. This was a Donna Karen, I know, but I can't call her back and say, listen, I need more. All right, so one last thing I want to do, and there's the pocket from the inside, and you notice again I haven't pressed it the whole entire time. And it's not necessary, and I think sometimes when we press, especially when the welt has those fragile corners, the welt's done now, in a single welt you stitch right here. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to top stitch just those little sections right there. And you're just going to stitch them. I back stitch them, so you're just going to stitch them the width of the welt. Don't go above and don't go more. And one thing that's nice, and I think that the reason the single welt is used a lot of times on the back of the pants is because of this stitching. It becomes a little more durable than the double welt. So it makes sense that it would be used back here because it has the reinforcement on the side to stabilize the pocket a little bit more. I think if you've ever noticed with men's pants, unfortunately that beautiful welt pocket has a tendency, if it's used a lot, to get holes in the corners where they've put their wallets in and out, in and out, in and out. It's kind of a bummer because it ruins the whole pants. So this is just a little edge stitching, and this is just there to hold the edge of the pocket in place. Alright, and then we get to do it again. Unless you don't want to watch it again, and I could do it later. Do you want to see it again? We'll let you guys decide. Whenever I do that, I notice there's always a 50-50 split. Half want to see it again and half want to say, no, let's go on to something else. So when the whole pocket's done, I want to press the welt up. So I'm just going to give it a good press on everything. Now when I was doing the jacket, we had a little sew-along. We did not record it, but we had a little sew-along in December. I had a couple of ladies who say, oh, I sewed right along with you. I kept up and I did it right along. So are you there, guys? Are we together? Are you faster than I am? I'm talking too much? Where are y'all? Now this is a new iron, and my new iron is spitting a little bit, and I'm ignoring it because it doesn't mark. It's not a big deal, but I had it up and I took it up to the workshop in Breckenridge, and we kept thinking, oh, it's because of the mountains and the high altitude, but it's still spitting, and I'm back in Dallas, so I decided I'll give it another week, and if it doesn't give up spitting, it's going to get exchanged. But I still wouldn't give up the iron. I love the iron. Okay, so what do y'all think? Is that pretty? You can see? Isn't that beautiful? Very simple to do. Straight stitching, just zoom, zoom, zoom. Alright, so are we doing it again, or what are we going on to something else? Yeah, let's take the tally. Let's take the vote. They want to do it again? Okay. Alright, so what I'm going to do now to mark the second pocket is you want to fold it in half. And line up your sides, to make sure the pocket's aligned in the right place. Don't ever mark two pockets at one time. It's just not necessary. And you're going to put a pin where your starting point is, and your starting point is this corner right here and this corner right here. That's where the original welt was stitched. So put it all the way through, and then just transfer those markings to this side, and I put a pin in there, and I put a pin in there. You could measure it, I never do, but you could, to make sure you're right. And there we have those two pins, and we're ready to start the next pocket. Alright, so we're going to do it again. I put the welt down, I center it between the two pins, and I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch and start right at the pocket. I backstitch so that I can clip those threads. You know, when I say I backstitch, you guys, I really developed a lot of these habits from watching The Factory, so it's not like I created this stuff. But I hate to always say the factory backstitches, because you know there is not the exact same all the way across the board. I take my pin outs, I clip the threads. And I noticed that there's either two kinds of sewers, either ones that clip threads or ones that leave thread. I am definitely a thread clipper. I can't stand the mess of the threads all over the place. I love it when it looks neat and nice. So it certainly doesn't change your garment whether you're a thread clipper or not a thread clipper. But just be aware that don't let it drive you crazy, because I'm a thread clipper, sorry. That's okay. My serger thread is a, well, it's small now, but it started actually on the cone. We sell a serger thread. And a lot of, I mean, you know, they're big cones. What I notice the difference between home sewing and factories a lot of times is that we pay more for things, and it kind of bothers me, so I try to offer some pricing that's a lot better. But some women just don't like it, and sometimes, so we sell like a really big black thread and a really big white thread, and these are really small from where they were when we started. I was tempted to change them, but I thought, no, they're fine. Okay, so again, notice that the pocket is up, the welt is down, and then if you look at the back side, I've got those two beautiful straight lines. What I like about this welt, and I've said this many times, but you know, if these two straight, there's no one who can't try this, because if these two lines are not straight when you start, just take it undone and do it again. You can't hurt by trying. And just leave that long triangle there. If you leave little bitty triangles, then the problem is the triangles can agitate and really cause problems. So the beauty is leaving them nice and long. They're much easier to work with. And when I cut through here, I cut through all layers. Again, I think it's easier to work from the back, so when I stick this pocket in the hole, I'm going to lay the pant down, and the welt behind this will flip up. The pocket will come inside, and I'm going to cover the hole. And when I cover the hole, I can't see where it's stitched, so I'm going to stitch on the side where I can see the stitching, and that kind of dictates to me where I stitch and how I stitch, and you know, if I just kind of listen to that whole concept, it really helps. If this is not straight, get it straight. Have the patience to get it straight. And once you have the two lines straight and you cut and you stitch on those lines, your pocket's going to be beautiful. Alright, so now I'm going to go to the front of the pant, because I'm going to do the ends. So simply pull the bottom of this pocket down, because sometimes that curl right there gets a little bit too much. And all I'm going to do here is sew over the big base of that triangle. You can pull it out a little bit to make sure the end is really nice. I learned this method from a woman who bought a house making welt pockets. She was fast. She had refined this method to where it was absolutely simply delicious, which as you can see it is. And she would go to the factories here in Dallas. She'd pick up all the anything that needed to have a welt on it. She would take it home, drop her kids off at school, take it home, make all the welts, and bring it back, pick her kids up from school, and she was done for the day. And she's an amazing lady. Anyway, she was nice enough to share with me this method. And I remember watching her the first time thinking, oh my, because she was so fast I couldn't, she'd made 6 pockets before I figured out step 1. But it is a great method. Okay, so before I do that, I'm just going to serge off my little ends again. And then I'm going to do the little top stitching. Anybody got a good joke? I'm kidding. How many seamstresses does it take to sew on a welt pocket? How many are watching? Yeah, let's leave out the... I told y'all this was not scripted. Clearly we should have, or we should at least hush up. Okay. Alright, so then I'm just gonna press the pocket again, and both pockets are done. Thanks for letting me do both pockets, you guys, because I'd have to come back later and do one. It's a lot better to do them at the time. I don't think there's anything that makes our garment look more professional than these welts. I don't think there's anything that people say, oh, you really made those? No, you didn't make those. And they're, they refer to these welt pockets in the back. So do your welts. Whoops. All right, there you have it. Both welts are done. Okay, we're good to go. So it's taken us an hour to do the back. If you didn't do welt, and if you didn't do this complexity, it would not even be close. Well, I don't know, it took us 30 minutes to cut out. But, you can see that I created the leg in 3 pieces, made it 1, and then the welts, they're not harder, but they take more time than than a patch would take. The patch, and you'll see a patch because I'll do it on the front now. Alright, so I'm going to put the back away because we don't need it for right now. We're going to do the front. We're going to transfer to the front, and the front includes a couple things that we need. The first thing we need it to include is this little front pocket, and there's only one. Serge all the way around it, or finish. When I say serge now, you guys will know I just mean sew all the way around. Or finish all the way around. I guess I should just say finish. The serger has a knife, yes. Alright, so in this case, each of these will get pressed. I'm going to have to press that. But because I try to minimize the amount of time I go back and forth to the iron, I just kind of think ahead and say, okay, what else do I need to do? And I've got a front fly, and that needs to be, I need to finish one edge. This kind of stuff's in your instructions. And you got to finish one edge and then one bottom. If you finish the whole thing, it puts too much bulk in it, so that's not necessary. And you have a right fly and a left fly. This is folded in half, and your edges finish. And so you're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, and finish the edge there. Alright, so now I need to press those, but even before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and do my front. My two fronts, because I can prepare my fly. There's my front. And so this is what it looks like. I mean, only again because it's in two pieces. This is the pocket, this is center front. So I'm going to serge or finish again these two fronts because they are going to be separate. How far apart do you sew the two lines for the welts? They are a 1/4 inch. They're both a 1/4 inch from the edge, so that will give you a 1/2 inch total width between the two. So a 1/4 inch from each edge is where they're going to be. Now this opening here, I'm at the center front of the pant is where I am, and there, as far as you're not going to stitch together this portion. You're only going to stitch together the bottom curve. It's based on how long your zipper is. Now I'm using a jean zipper, and my zipper is longer than my opening. It's longer than I need it to be. So use the top, still stay at the top and use the top like you need to. But you can see that my zipper is even longer than my fly attachments. But what I want is my fly attachments to separate, but I wanted the zipper to be as long as I can, because with jeans we have a very short area that opens up. Now the bigger the difference is between your waist and your hip, the longer you need this to be. If you're kind of straight bodied, you don't have to worry about it. So I want this notch to be as low as I can, but don't go into this curved part. You don't want to be reaching around the curve to zip your pants. So be aggressive and make it as long as you can, but at the same portion, you know, don't go into the curve. So here I'm going to start stitching here, and I'm going to sew the two fronts together of the pants, and I'm going to back stitch. So I'm going to drop my 3/8 and give this a good back stitch, and that's simply because this, at this point, we're going to reference this point several times. It's really where everything comes together as I'm doing a fly. I'm doing a fly on the front of the pant, and everything's going to come together at that point. So really just for durability, I want a back stitch so that it'll just, so that my pant won't come apart, etc., etc. I'm going to do the fly first because my pant's flat and it's so much easier if I do the fly first. I could do the pockets, it doesn't make a difference. It's total preference, but I'm going to go ahead and do the fly. I've got my pieces done, and I'm going to go press everything. And when I press, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this seam allowance back, and I'm going to press this seam allowance back. But let me just show you on the inside here. When I go to do this, this is a 3/8. On the side where the fly is going to go, I'm only going to press back a 1/4. I actually want to be a little bit of a difference between this stitched width and this folded back amount. I'll show you in a little bit why, but this is going to be 3/8 and this is only going to be 1/4. Now again, that's all in your directions too, but I'm going to show you what difference it makes in the jean if you've got a little bit more coverage in the zipper as opposed to folding it back automatically. They're done a little bit differently in dress pants than they are in jeans, but you could do it the same way. You don't have to do it different. So we'll give that side a nice press. We'll give this side a nice press. And again, the only thing I did was save myself a little bit of step. On the jean front, the seam itself is again pushed to the right side. So I'm actually going to press that seam. I'm not going to press it open. The seam that I've stitched, I'm going to press it to the right side. And it is top stitched, and you'll see what a nice difference that makes. It's not top stitched yet. I guess you could do it now. It doesn't matter when you do it, but I'm going to do it a little bit later. Okay, so that's ready there. I'm going to press the piece I folded in half. This I didn't need anything. It doesn't really need pressing, but I'm going to press that. And then I'm going to press my little jean pocket. I can kind of do all of that at once. And I'm going to fold down. It comes down about a 1/2 inch. And then on the bottom of the pocket, this is that little coin pocket is what it is, and it goes on the right hand side. So I don't do the bottom because it's down in the pocket, and if you do, it kind of creates an extra bulk that you just don't need. So leave the bottom. I'll stitch the bottom, but you don't need to turn it over. The only reason I'm turning over the sides is because they'll actually show. So let me do this and then I'll show it to you. This is live guides is what this is. This is a live guide sheet. So on the pocket itself, I folded that under. I'll stitch that, but notice the bottom is not. So you'll see when I stitch it in place how I do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the fly, and then we'll worry about the front pockets here in just a little bit. Alright, so I'm a stickler to a zipper foot. If you don't have a zipper foot, you can use your Teflon foot and just move the needle all the way to the left. I'm just using a regular 70-10 needle. 70-10. So once I've moved this piece right here, I should get the names for you so you guys, I mean, we've had this on, it's piece number 7. And it's what makes the zipper assembly. All I'm doing is connecting the zipper to this piece, and this is the folded section. It doesn't matter where you connect these two, as long as you connect them together. And I think the biggest problem that I see across the board is as I'm in workshop and I watch women sew, is they try to get really close to the zipper, and that's a mistake. I don't need to get close to the zipper. The only thing I need to do is connect those two. Alright, I've pressed this back on my pant. So there's my pant front. This is going to be the left-hand side of my pant front. It's folded back, and I'm literally just going to place this on top. And I always line up my raw edges and keep all of that nice and together. And my only goal here, again, is don't get too close to the zipper. My only goal here is to cover up the previous stitch. And I'm stitching this right on the edge. It's called edge stitching. Alright, so go ahead. It's marked on the pattern. You want it I did it about 2 inches below the yoke. Now the yoke is a design issue, so you will find some discrepancies there as to where they're done, but I did it 2 inches below the yoke. No, when you're making a muslin, what I did is I just left the front open. Don't put a zipper in. It's way too much work on the muslin. It's a good question though. Alright, so I'm coming down, and I'm not going to that back stitch point. I want you all to kind of see this. Can we get this on camera just so they can kind of see, or I guess I can sew it and then show you. So this point, and then I'm going to back stitch, is actually done purposely, and I think even in workshops I generally don't show this because it's a little step extra, but it's in the directions. So notice the seam amount is over here, but I only turned under 1/4 inch here, and that reasoning is so when these two come together, you notice what good coverage you get of your zipper, and so you want that coverage, otherwise your zipper will have a tendency to kind of peek out. So be sure you're only folding under 1/4 inch here, but you took a 3/8, and you can see the difference there. You're not actually stitching to that point, you're going to stitch inside. This point will be held down when I do my top stitching and I come around, that will be secured, so don't worry about that point just yet. Okay? Alright, that's all I wanted, thanks. Alright, so the first one then, I do the zipper assembly on that side, I just do a top stitch. It's very simple to do. I come back with my next piece. I've serged it on one side. The side that's not serged, I'm going to sew to center front, and I'm going to do right sides together, and I'm going to stitch right down to that back stitched point. I'm going to put my needle back in the middle because it's easier for me to kind of guide it that way and to see where I'm stitching. And I've already pressed this, so just stay on your 3/8 and you'll not have any problem. And I actually don't have to stitch all the way down to that point because it's wrapping around and folding to the inside, so I really don't need it to be exact. I need it to be the exact width, but I actually don't need it to go together. So you can see when I wrap this around, and when I wrap it around, when I go to press it, I'll press it now, press that seam under so that it's not going to show on the front side. So just give it a little bit of a press to the inside. And you do have to press this in the process. I wouldn't recommend that you not press it, and I wouldn't recommend that you do anything else. Just complete the zipper, but just take a minute and give this a little bit of a press. Okay. That's pressed. I'm going to lay it down, and I'm going to put 2 pins vertically. The first one, I want to make sure that that's coming straight up, so I'm going to put one here, and then I want to make sure I'm going to be working from the inside for just a minute, so the pins that are vertical will hold those center fronts in place, and I don't have to worry that my zipper actually won't be covered. So this is a great way. Now I can work inside. The zipper assembly, if you notice, is all secure and it's attached to this side of the pant, but the zipper is not yet attached to this side of the pant. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to just grab the little piece that I just added, and that's the whole purpose of adding this piece, is so that I can have a top stitching to the zipper. So I want to add or stitch these two together, just this piece and the zipper, and I can turn it to the back and just stitch the two together. And again, I'm going to move my needle to the left because I don't need to be close to the zipper. I only need to connect these two. My fronts are all pinned together, and there I have it. Alright, I keep throwing stuff back here. I hope I'm making the basket anyway. Okay, so nothing changed in the front. I just simply now have the zipper attached to this side, and then my goal now is to attach this little piece to this side. So if you're doing a men's fly, you just flip everything around 180 degrees. Everything's just opposite. But when I go to do this top stitching now, take this zipper assembly and move it out of the way. Otherwise, I will get a pair of pants that I cannot unzip. They'll look beautiful, but I can't unzip them. So I'm ready to do the fly stitching, and I actually do a zipper now because I can get a little closer without worrying about hitting the head. And you're going to take the zipper foot, put it all the way to the left, but turn the needle and go all the way to the right. And that way my pressure will be as far away from the zipper head as it will possibly be. I've not changed stitch length. I'm still at 3.0. I'm still keeping the same thing. I've got a little zipper, this little foot ruler that I'm always using at the sewing machine, and it's for what I want to do is top stitch 1 inch from center front. So basically what I do is I just use this ruler as a guide. So just sink your needle in an inch wide, and then I can just move my needle, I can move my foot down as I go along. The other option I want to give you is if on every zipper that's out there, if you buy it in a package, if you notice the back, you can just open this up right here, and this is actually a template for a fly. So I can cut it off at the fold, and there's my fly right there. It doesn't go all the way in, but I can just curve it all the way in. So I can use this as a template. This little template there is, I think it's 1 1/4 inches. But I will tell you that on all pants it's 1 1/4 inches. On jeans it's 1 inch because the second stitch is 1 1/4 inches. So if I stitch the first one 1 1/4 inches wide, my second stitch, because you're going to have 2 stitches that come around the curve, it'll just be too fat. It'll just look too fat. It's not a good look. That's consistently across all jeans, believe it or not. And I think it's just because it doesn't look good. But anyway, so this is going to come down 1 inch in this case, and then I'm going to double stitch it. So just bring it straight down 1 inch, and then at some point you can get rid of that. And I'm going to look at where my jeans opened, and you can put a little pin crosswise to see where you're going. Remember that back stitched point, that's where you're going to curve around. So this is really important, you guys, to pay attention on this, because when you're sewing, because I've got a metal zipper and my needle is going to have to go through that metal zipper because my zipper is longer than my fly, my fly pieces. You can get a zipper that's shorter if you want. You can put the bottom of the zipper up higher if you want. It's not how I choose to do it, but you can do this however you want. You can change up the options. I'm going to stitch through the zipper, and you can do this pretty easily. You just have to walk it, and if you hit something hard, your everything's gonna know. So just don't force it there. Just kind of jiggle the needle, and it'll go to each side. And once you're to a point you're already past it, and then do a little back stitch. Alright, so there's number 1. Remember, you're going to do this twice, and make sure your zipper assembly is completely out of the way. If you stitch through that, you can just clip it, not to worry, because you're going to stitch it again, and you're going to do top stitch, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Alright, so there's my fly. This is such a pretty fly. I love these flies. I'm going to undo this pin. I don't need it there anymore, even though I'm going to do the second round, and you can see that there's the fly in place. Isn't that beautiful? Alright, any questions with that? And you can also see that I've got enough hangover here. Now I'm going to come down and put a top stitching all through here, and I'm going to do that now before I actually do the secondary stitch, because it'll cover up. You can't really tell which stitch was done first, and it won't really matter. But you're going to take just this little piece right here, and you're going to top stitch it. And it's going to be done from the top to the bottom of the zipper, and then you're going to have to lift it up and continue it. Yes. Well, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. You can, when you're doing any kind of power netting or kind of girdling, I'm going to call it girdling, those are going to be connected, this seam over and this seam over. So I would go ahead and put it in your fly and then connect it. I think it's probably easier if you do it that way. Alright, so notice I top stitched right here. Now I'm going to go ahead, and the seams are going to go to the same side, and I'm going to top stitch this inseam now. It doesn't matter which way you go. I just got to make sure I put it the right way so that I top stitch the right way. Okay, so both of those are going to go to the right, and I'm going to top stitch to the right. And I'm going to start a little bit above where I stopped so it will look continual. I'm going to pick up that seam where I stopped above, so as I come to this inseam here in the leg, it will actually look continual. Now keep in mind that again, this is kind of flat fell looking. I have noticed on some jeans that there's a single stitch, and I have noticed on others there's a double. Most of the time on women's there's a single, on men there's a double. So it's your choice as to where you do it. Now when you do it like this, what you'll notice is this, it looks continual. I mean, even to my naked eyes, I just can't tell where that stops and starts. It looks all the way. And I've still got this second stitch I'm going to bring along, and I'm going to back stitch right on top of everything so that it really, you can't tell what's happening. Alright, and then there's one more step to that fly that I want to show you. So I'm going to go ahead and do this 1/4 inch from the first one. Just make sure that that flies out of the way, or after you've done all this work, that stitching has to come out. I've had so many women in classes say to me, isn't there any way to get the pants down? No, there's not. You have to undo the stitching. So be careful that my zipper's coming up, or that my metal zipper's coming up. There it is. Just navigate your way through it. It will go right through it. If you don't navigate your way through it, you will break your needle. Alright, so I'm telling you, don't take it for granted that your needle will just sail right through. It won't. But once I am through it, it's no problem. There's my little back stitch. Okay, the last step you're going to do on this fly is, this piece is floppy back here, your zipper assembly. I want to put it behind the fly, and I'm going to stitch it together so that it holds in place. And just any kind of stitch, it doesn't matter, I just kind of do an angular one. These pieces here at the bottom are all serged. If they're too long, I could cut them off, but this is the time where I don't need this zipper anymore. I would wait until I finish it to kind of cut it off, and there is just that beautiful fly, and it's gorgeous. Let's see a close-up. I'm going to lay it down. Alright, so there's the front. You can see where I top stitched there. Here's all the double top stitching going on. You could actually come back and do another top stitch in there. There's a thread I didn't clip, and then I'll open it up so you can see the inside. The double stitching there. And then there's the inside. Isn't that beautiful? Then I need to just give it a little press. We okay? Okay, there we have it. Okay, so now it's time for these side pockets. I've got 2 front facings and then 2 pockets. And then I've got my little coin pocket. And I think for me, when you're doing this kind of stuff, this is just all about a jean looking homemade or not homemade, because I don't think, you know, I said that a little while ago. I said I don't ever use my coin pocket, but in the last little while I've actually found kind of some fun little things to do with those little coin pockets. They're perfect for just a little key or a couple quarters. I don't know, you can find all kinds of things to put in them, so I'm going to renege on that. Alright, so I'm just going to do right sides together here. I think it's important to line up the angle, because if the angle is not right when you go to flip it into the right side, it won't match the side. So do that right sides together. And stitch your 3/8. You can't invert a 3/8, so I'm going to trim this to an 1/8. If you were to stitch it at an 1/8, you couldn't tell a bit of difference. Your pocket opening would be a little smaller. The 3/8 actually creates a little bit larger opening. It's built into the pattern. I do both of them at the same time because to me there's no reason to go to the sewing machine and iron one when the other one's just around the corner. Should I tell you I love this table? Because it's so easy to sew flat, and I do think after watching so many people in the factories, they all have big tables. And I think it's just so much easier to get things sewn straight when you have a flat surface to work on than when you're trying to, you know, come into a bump on the sewing machine. Okay, so that needs to be pressed. Just before I go do that, as long as I'm sitting here, I'm going to do the coin pocket, and again, by looking at that pair of jeans I have over there that I keep eyeing, this is where the coin pocket goes on this pocket. I am going to pull this back up just to get my marking so I don't even have to think. And then to get my marking, I just put two little pins, one there, one there. I mark things a lot with pins. I don't know, I don't even have marking tools, but I do think there's one little marking tool that I found a little while ago. Somebody had it in a class and I thought that is a really cool marking tool. So I'm looking at finding it so I can put it on the website, because I mean this was a pretty cool little marking tool. Okay, so before I put this on, I'm going to stitch a double row of the little top stitching there. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch the same that I've stitched everything else, which would be a 1/4 inch from the edge, stitch the sides, and then a little edge stitching, or kind of edge stitching type look, just to be consistent with the rest of the jean. And I have noticed that all these little coin pockets, they do have stitching on them. So I think these are the kind of details that we really need to do that make it look right. You're actually going to overstitch these, so I don't find any reason to redo them or to backstitch or anything like that, because once I go to place it on the pocket, which is now, I'm going to start stitching right here at this top pin, and you're going to backstitch here, and you're stitching kind of on top of that other stitch. So I'm stitching along the fold line. Along the bottom is not turned up, and that's just to reduce that bulk a little bit. Come up the other side. And I backstitched all of this so my threads can just be cut. Alright, so now I've got to press, and I've got to press these seams in to the other side. So I'm going to press from the wrong side, because what I want to do is actually curl this seam in just a bit. It was kind of how I did on the fly front. You don't want this seam to really be on the edge. You want it to be on the inside. And just give that a little bit of heat. And we're going to top stitch this as well. The fly is so pretty. I swear I love this fly method. I love doing the flies because they just are simple and turn out beautiful. Pull that to the inside and just roll that seam just a little bit to the inside. Alright, and then I'm going to press my little pocket. And my back of my pant is waiting patiently for us to finish the front. And we're getting close. We're almost there. Okay. So I'm going to lay this down. I'm going to match up the side that goes to the side. and I do serge this section, but again, anything that finishes that pocket is not a big deal. On this side, my coin pocket is just ready to go. That's already done. So I just put the pins far enough away from the edge so that I can still pick it up and serge just the pocket. I serge the pocket to the facing. I did question is, did I pre-shrink the fabric? Yeah, if you weren't here in the beginning, I did go ahead. I cut the yardage that the pattern needed. I washed it with Coca-Cola in the washing machine, and I threw it in the dryer. So I did that prior. In this particular fabric, I did not have any shrinkage. I didn't have any color change. I didn't have any shrinkage because I just kind of carefully marked the beginning, and then I marked the end. And I don't know why I didn't have any shrinkage, but I didn't. I mean, not all fabric shrinks. I don't mean to say that weirdly, but I didn't have any shrinkage on this. And I like that because in this particular case what it means is I won't get a lot of stretch. You know, jeans stretch and then react when we wash them, and because I didn't get a lot of movement, it means I probably won't get a lot of movement in that process. Okay. So I'm going to top stitch the top of this little corner here now, and again I'm just stitching right on the edge, and then a 1/4 inch again from the edges on this. Are you guys sewing while you're watching? Sewing as you're watching? Yes? No? No? Drinking wine while you're watching, or is it too early for wine? Now some of you I know are at night, so I know it's not too early for wine. You could still be drinking wine while you're watching. I'm just going to secure that in place because when it's the waistband will secure it in place, but until then it kind of, you know, it can flop a little bit. So I just stitch those 2 little sections there. You don't have to, you could pin them. Again, I think it goes back to where if I can use a stitch instead of a pin, I do. Probably because there's not a lot of pins used commercially because they are they damage the machines, and well, they damage people. People actually step on them. Is that fair? So they just really try to stay away from pins. Alright, so what's next? What's next is that we have shorts right now in the front because we haven't connected the front of the pant, and it's an angular seam in the front. The back was 3 pieces, the front is only 2 pieces. So right here, let me just show you something, because when I cut and sewed and you guys saw me do everything, there's a little bit of extra in that pocket right there, but it's laying completely flat, so I just got rid of that. It doesn't make any difference. I did it to, don't do it before you sew the facing on, because then the pocket and the pocket facing won't match. But at this point, because I have everything sewn on and everything's laying flat and it looks really nice, you can do that. Okay, there's no reason to keep the pins in place. Everything's good. Alright, there we have the front. Everything's laying flat. I don't want anything kind of poking up or being funky on there. We good? Yep. No. No, you're only top stitching the top layer. You don't want to close them. I don't want to close them. I mean, yeah, you don't want to close them. You don't want to close them. You just want to sew them to where that they're laying flat, and you can see that lays flat on the body. So that's not going to give you any gapping issues, because remember, your body's going to be curved inside. And I'll try these on when we finish so you can see them all on. But this will be, you know, this will be curved on the body, so it'll actually keep that nice and closed. And I mean, there's no gapping anyway, but you understand what I'm saying. It'll keep that nice and closed. So you don't want to stitch the pocket closed, or I don't want to stitch my pockets closed. Guess if you want to, you can, but I don't want to. Okay, so you can see we only have shorts. So what we're ready to do now is sew on the bottom of the leg. And that is this portion, and they are angled. They're angled, and that angle actually matches the side of the pant when we go to put the side on. So we'll watch for that later, but you can see that this goes like this. So I'm going to do a right sides together. I'm going to serge, and then I'm going to create a flat fell on these two seams, and then I'll be ready to put the pant together, the front and the back together. This is so exciting! It's all design here. This was all design. This was the original Escada pant, and I just loved the angles. I loved the lines on it. They were just, I put that pant on, I couldn't believe how beautiful it fit. And the lines, you know, the lines gave, if you're short especially, the lines gave such vertical movement. They're just beautiful. Alright, so these are both seams that are going to get pressed down, because the top stitching is going to be done down. And you know, you could top stitch these without pressing them. I just think it, I don't know, I think it just looks a little bit better when they're pressed. And actually they're a little bit easier to top stitch when they're pressed down. So I press both of those down, and I'm ready to do the flat fell. Alright, so again, if you do twin needle, this is your moment to shine. If you don't, you're like me. And actually what I do, like when I'm doing something like this, I actually just pivot it at the end and come back the wider seam. I just do it all at one time. So just leave your needle down and turn. Stitch it like 2 stitches. I didn't cut the fabric. What, when I, just now when I was cutting the fabric? I didn't cut the fabric, no. Yeah, all of your fabric cutting or whatever should all be done in the muslin phase. Once you're, to me, once you're sewing, you don't want to be cutting things. The only thing, I trimmed up that pocket because, you know, maybe when I laid it on the fabric and it was a little bit off, by the time I sewed it, it was a little bit off. Not a big deal. It's not going to change everything. But the angles of the pant themselves, no, I don't want to change those at all. Ask that question again, sorry. If you, yeah, okay. Well, let's go back to LC and D. LC and D is length, circumference, and depth. So on a pant, if I'm changing dramatically the fabric, you know, one thing my children taught me is I can't do two things at once. I'm really lousy at doing two things at once. So let me just stop for a minute and explain this to you, because I do think it's really important. When you are, you know, a pant, everything below the waist is called a pant. And yet it's interesting to me how when we talk about a top, we differentiate. We call it a blouse, we call it a t-shirt. And the difference between those terminologies is one is knit and one is woven. A blouse is woven in general, a t-shirt is knit. And we wouldn't even think about making one muslin to do both of those. So in a jean, if we're changing a jean from a woven fabric to a knit fabric, LCD changes too much for us to possibly just carry it over. Alright, so a new muslin needs to be made if my fabric is dramatically different, just as I would in a blouse and in a t-shirt. Alright? Okay, for the record, my front is complete. Is that cool? It is time to put the front and the back together. Drum roll, please. The angles are very slimming, and no question the angles are slimming. I can't believe I've only done that once. As many times as that cord is just not in a good place. But anyway, it has to be where it has to be. I'm just going to kind of press this. And then I just did the seam, and I'm going to press that. Because really it's the only time you'll really press that. Once it goes together, I'm certainly not going to come back and press, if that makes sense. So I'm usually pressing a seam once I stitch it. They're really pretty. They're really pretty. I just really enjoy sewing. It's such a fun proposition. Okay, so I'm going to put the front and the back together now. Because the inseam, oh, you guys are over here. That's okay. That's okay. Alright, because the inseam is I'm not sure how my needle came unthreaded, but it did. It's all in my wire. Because the inseam is a flat fill seam, that seam actually has to be done first. And actually that's a positive, because if you are trying to do a little bit of adjustment on your jeans, the adjustment would be done through the outseam. So you can go ahead and do the inseam and feel comfortable that you wouldn't have to make any changes on that anyway. So it's time to do that, and I serge it. When I serge it, I start at the inseam because I want them to be together. Not that anyone's going to check between my legs to make sure they are. So far, no one in any of my sewing ever has ever ducked there to see if my seams match. But I want them to match simply because I want the legs to match. So I'm going to put them close because exact is not necessary. And I'm going to stitch down one side. And remember, I'm on the inseam. There is no seams to match here because, the angular seams, they only match on the outside. Because the long piece in the back doesn't have an angular seam, so there's not anything to match. Go to the end and make sure they're the same, and just give it some little bit of pull. Keep your edges lined up. And mine came out to where those are a little uneven at the bottom. Right now I'm not going to worry about that. But I am going to do the other side and see what happens there. You cannot am I going to flat fell the outer seam? No, the outer seam is not flat felled in jeans. I don't think I've ever seen a jean that had the outer seam flat felled. The inner seam is always flat felled. That's out of tradition. There's many times where there's none of the seams are flat felled, but never is the outer. I've never seen the outer seam flat felled. This is the inseam, and the inseam was done traditionally because of horses, riding horses, and all the things. The inside is to protect the inner thigh, but not on the outside. No, the serger is just doing the 3/8. The serger is, well, I'm trimming, yeah, the serger, I have a 3/8 inch seam, and the serger usually leaves a 1/4 inch seam. So that little bit of fall off will just be, it's not necessary. The serger will reduce it, but it does, even if you don't reduce it, you don't need it. Alright, so here I've got the front and the back together. And I'm going to press this. I'm going to go and just give it a little. I need to practice sewing with a cord between my legs, obviously. Sorry, you guys. Alright, so this flat felled seam is pressed to, oops, I'm going to do it this way, is pressed to the front. When it's a flat felled seam, it comes to the front. So I'm actually going to press the seam to the front. And the reason that's done, well, actually, I've never gone back on old jeans, Levi's, to see if they were ever done a different way. Every jean I've ever seen comes to the front. But it definitely, in our modern age, it makes us look thinner, you guys. So press them to the front for no other reason, just to give yourself a thinner look. My bottom of my pant right there is not matching, and it's the same on both sides. So obviously something's wrong with my pattern. Because it doesn't make a difference, I'm going to cut it off eventually. I won't have to worry about it right now. No, even if you pull, nothing will pucker. It's such a slight gather of any, it's not a gather, it's not the right word, easing of any kind, it will never show in the fabric. Now that's my pattern, that's how I created it because of a change I made, but it's not necessarily going to be in every one. Okay, so again, I'm going to flat fell that entire seam, and however long it takes me, it would have been half the time if I decided to use a double needle. Just make sure before you start that you're doing it to the front. There's Brett, watch that camera. Sorry. Sorry, I'm moving too much. Anyway, like I said, just make sure you're getting the front to the front. Actually, the pucker is a kind of a, it's not a bad thing because your jeans actually pucker. And at the end I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you, I'm going to tell you. If you want that kind of denim-y look where they're bleached on the top side, you just take a cloth of bleach and only rub over the top. And that will take off the color off the top and give that worn look. I don't do it. I just let my jeans wear themselves because I like them at all different phases. But some people want an immediately worn look. When you guys are sewing, always keep your hand behind and a hand in front. The machine will not pull it through evenly, so you really have to kind of tell the machine what to do. So recognize that question asked a little bit ago, you can't have a flat fell in the middle and a flat fell on the outside, because you can't access the leg to sew it like this, even with the machines in the store. You don't have both. Side seams go to the front. Typically in a garment they do not. But in a jean they go to the front, so they can be flat felled. That's the inseam. That's not the outseam. The outseam will go to the back, just as it's just as in the rules. This is kind of an exception to the rule. So we're 2 hours in, huh? Aren't those pretty? Those seams are so pretty. This is fun. My bobbin thread is low. So this is a time where you hope you make it to the bottom of the leg, which I didn't make. So I do have another bobbin wound, which I typically would not do that if I was home sewing by myself. And when you do the stitching, you'll find that you can stop, and people I think kind of panic that they can't stop stitching, but you can. I'm going to pick up that stitching, you'll never even see that I stopped. Just cut off all the end of the bobbin. I'm going to get rid of this one and put in this one. I decided that y'all would not really enjoy watching me wind a bobbin, so I did that ahead of time. You don't want to backstitch because it'll cause too much of a heavier thread difference. Just pick up right where you left off and keep going. You'll see it actually all the time, and it happens in factories, because I can see places on jeans that I purchase where the thread will start to come loose, and when it starts to come loose you can kind of see a difference. So I'm going to cut it there and go to the inside and cut it there. Alright. It's regular weight thread, yes, regular thread. No, I didn't make any changes in the thread. It doesn't mean you can't, but I didn't. The weight of the denim is on the side. It's sold out, but I actually left what I'm sewing with on the site so that you could see it. I don't remember offhand what it is. I want to say it's probably 6 ounces if I had to guess. It's probably a 6 ounce. Alright, on the side seam now is what I'm doing. The inseams are all done. I want to align these two seams. So those seams are important that they be aligned. I'm actually going to serge this whole thing, but before I do that, I'm actually going to stitch these two together to make sure that the verticals come together. If you're doing, I don't mean verticals, the diagonals. If you are doing the pocket, there's a patch pocket on top of it, it doesn't matter if they match, but I'm not doing a patch pocket and I want them to match. Alright, so that's good for me there. The top, there's a little bit extra. I'll work that in. I'm not concerned about that. I just want to go to the other side and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and do both sides while I'm here. So if they don't match, just line them up again, and I always just kind of run a little basting stitch right in that area. Do it inside your seam line so that it doesn't show. Then you want to work the top to that point, and then I always start from the top when I'm doing this and then work the bottom to that point, and that's perfect. Okay. So again, I'm just going to line those two up and start stitching, start serging. If you're trying to make some kind of manipulative changes, you actually don't have to serge this side seam. You could just sew it so that you have some ability to control it. I think most of that really you want to do in your muslin, so that at this point you feel comfortable with whatever your fit is. I think the jean is such a well-fitting garment that you really want to take the time and do that muslin. And do it, you know, to where it works for you. Keep your edges even, because if not, one seam, they're different shapes. One seam will get longer and one seam will get wider. I put a serge at the bottom. You certainly don't need to. I do because you're actually, when you do a jean hem, you're actually going to turn it up. And you don't turn it up once, you actually turn it up twice. But I still use a serged bottom. Alright, that's the one side. We're going to do the other side. Make sure the top's aligned just because it should be. I can't tell you how important it is to align the side seams, because the shaping is going to be a little different in the front and the back, and if they're not aligned, it'll make a big difference. Those two seams, when I lined these up, they were just a teeny bit off. I'm going to take that down just a little bit. They were close, but just not exactly where I want them, so there we go. again I'm going to do the bottom. So on my jean on the bottom, I had a little bit of mismatch. Both of my fronts were about a half an inch, not a half an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch longer. So when I evened that up on the serger, I actually cut off the part that was 3/8 of an inch, but I went even to the other section. So I just realigned that. And then what I'll do is I'll go back and check my pattern to make sure that it's okay. Now because I'm confident of this fit, this jean gets, the last thing to do is to put the waistband on, but one little tip before I do that, and I'll do the hem here in a minute, is this seam right here, and the purpose is to hold the pocket back in place. This seam right here gets sewn backwards, and it's a stitch that goes down to the bottom of the pocket. And again, the seam goes to the back. The seam, that's that side seam now, so you can do it right after you do the side seam. And just make sure that I'm not going to press as much as I'm going to feel that it's under. And again, it's just a single stitch. I've seen it on every single jean ever out there. In fact, I swear if I don't see it on a jean, it sounds crazy, but it kind of looks homemade to me, because this stitch is everywhere, and its really only purpose is to hold that pocket seam backwards. I guess just so the jean lays flatter. So you're just going to continue it down until you can feel the bottom of the pocket. And then you do a little back stitch once you get to the bottom. All right. Where's the end of my thread? Go ahead. 3,500, uh-huh. Say that again, the inseam is not a flat fell on the 3,500? Is that what they're saying? Well, you might press it open, but still flat fell it. Make sure that it's not flat felled. Because sometimes when you're going to flat fell, we suggest that you press it open so that then you press it to one side. So just make sure in the directions that it's still not pressing to one side. But it should be the inseam that is flat felled. Always the inseam. So I could press this, I'm not, because I have found it doesn't make a difference as long as you've got both seams going, because I can pull on this seam to make sure it's laying flat. Where I'm stitching? Yes. Let me show you here, just 1 second. Give me just half a second. This is the side of the jean is where this is. And it is always done on jeans. It's always done at the side seam, and its purpose is to hold the pocket piece. Let me just show you. See, here we are. So what I did is right here, the side of the jean, this seam goes to the back, the side seam goes to the back, and there's a stitch that goes here, and it stops at the bottom of the pocket, even though you can't see where the pocket is. You know, because this pocket's inside, but it's back stitched there. But that is a top stitching that's done on just every jean out there. So be sure you watch for that, and be sure you include that in your jean. And its only purpose can possibly only be to hold the seam of that pocket back in place, that serge seam. And I left a really long thread inside. Okay. Alright, so how are we doing there? Okay, so the only thing we have left, right, is the waistband. See those seams on the side? They just match beautifully. Okay, so let's put a waistband on. Very simple to do. My waistband is here. I used my selvage, and that's not necessary. It's just something I did. I started doing it a long time ago. So I have a tendency to cut my waistband first, and I just use the selvage so that one side is finished. The waistband on a pair of jeans is always left down in the inside, and so when you use the selvage, you don't have to finish off that edge. It's finished off for you. So I've cut 2 layers of the waistband, and right now I'm just going to sew along and sew them together. The waistband is put on with what we call edge stitching. We're going to sew, press, and then sew it on. So right now I'm just sewing the 2 layers of the waistband together, right sides together. I'm sewing not the selvage edge, but the raw edge. Okay, and then I crossed it and I'm sewing one end. Just one end is all I need. I'm going to fold it. I'm going to fold it. There are 2 folds, a fold in, a fold down. Hold that and invert that to the other side so that you get a nice crisp, clean corner there. Alright, so I'm going to, you might need to press this open, but it doesn't matter. You need to press it in half. So let's go to the ironing board. We'll press the waistband and we're going to kind of prep it to put it on. So sometimes when in the guide sheets we have you press it open just to get a nice press on it. In this particular case you want the seam at the top, and I don't even roll it to the inside. I literally just leave it at the top. But it helps to get it open if you press it open and then fold it in half, which is what I'm going to do. Alright, for me it's a little easier if I press from the wrong side. So I've determined that this is going to be the wrong side. And I usually am left-handed on this iron, but because I realized nobody could see, I'm pressing backwards today. So it feels a little awkward, but it's working. I think jeans don't really have a lot of pressing to them as much as they have. You just have to kind of press it to start the next section, if that makes sense. You don't actually have to press the fabric. Alright, so I've left on this waistband one edge is raw. One edge here. I've only finished off one edge. Your directions have you finishing off 2, but this is going to be a little easier for you to do. And it's definitely how... Are y'all still there? In the hair? Alright, so on the right side, you are going to press the right side up. Now, the waistband is wide enough, and kind of what I decided ahead of time is I wanted part of this white on my waistband. So I really am going to put like a little white line above my waistband. I know if you don't know what I'm talking about, just a minute and I'll show you. So I'm going to use that as a guideline. You press both up for just a little bit to clear the zipper. Then you leave the back down all the way, and you're only going to press the top up. So this is just kind of preparing the waistband. So let me show that to you after I do it. So the top portion, you can see I'm going to leave that band. It's about 1/4 of an inch showing. It's such a pretty selvage. I'm going to use it to my advantage. Remember, I'm not going to wear a belt because the selvage is so pretty. So I've pressed this under both sides equally, but just on the bottom layer, just until it clears the zipper. And then you want to leave it all the way down. I'm only pressing up the top layer, and I'm using this little white line, but you would press under 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm using the white line as a guide to keep it straight, but normally you can just use the edge of your fabric to keep it straight. You just want to keep the width consistent. The finished waistband is about 1 inch wide on a jean. So I'm pressing the top layer up and just preparing that band. A lot of your, I think, time in sewing pants and waistbands, or jeans in general, and let's go back to the sewing machine, is making sure that they fit. So you try on, and normally I would try on right at this point, because if I wanted to do any little tweaks, then you can easily do them through the side seam before I stitch that top stitch, because you could easily adjust them through the side seam. The rest of the fit should be okay. I'm going to have faith that they're going to be okay, and I'm coming now to the waistband. I'm just literally going to just envelope that waist right inside of that band. So I'm just covering the raw edge, and I'm going to edge stitch it right in place. I can look underneath and see that they're both that I've covered the top of the band at 3/8 of an inch, and the back, you can see I folded up enough to miss that zipper so that I don't worry about getting the waistband in the way of the zipper. Alright, so notice that I'm starting on the side where the fly is. It's going to be the front side, the top side. You always want to start with the top side. That might feel a little bit awkward to you because you've got the whole pant underneath the machine, but that's the way it's done. Sorry. This is a little back stitch that I'm going to do just to anchor that in place before I start. And then once I get started, I want to show you kind of how to sew this waistband in. So notice I'm not doing right sides together. So if you just stick the pant, kind of just stick one leg in and leave one leg behind. So I'm going to line this all up, straighten it up, and I'm going to pull the waistband and don't pull the top of the pant. So as I stitch along the top, that's what I'm going to do. So you're just going to do a little section at a time. If you don't pull that waistband, even if the pant fits really nicely, it'll have a tendency to flare out at the top. So be sure that the action goes, I'm going to pull the waistband, I'm going to just lay this pant right inside and just edge stitch that little section. And that's all that keeps that band in place, is that little tiny, not tiny, but do the next little section, is that edge stitch. If you take an edge stitch off on a pair of jeans, jeans will come apart. They are not done right sides together. Alright, so just keep going and just do your little sections. I can't emphasize to you all how important it is to pull on this waistband. If you do it and you haven't pulled enough, you can redo it, but the goal is to do it all in the beginning. Now there's just a couple little tricks I want to show you on the waistband, and then I think we're kind of done. Poke it under, pull. I did a waistband that's straight a grain. There are numerous designers out there. Ellie Tahari, Chanel in fact, does a waistband that is bias. And when it is bias, it has a seam at center back. I think it's, depending on your shape, if you're really, really curvy, then I think the bias is helpful. I think I'm really curvy, but as long as you pull this waistband, I don't have any problem with waistbands being the same. But if you do a regular waistband and you just have a real hard time with it laying flat against your body, then you could try the bias. Okay, when you get around to about here, if you notice I'm past the I've gone all the way around. Well, I'm going to go to this front pocket is where I'm going to go to. It's probably a good point to kind of check yourself. I pressed it in 3/8 of an inch all the way. And what I have as a guide is the amount that's tucked under. So I can lift it up and check the edge to see if the edge and the top of the jean are at the same place. So I can kind of use that as my guide. So I'm right at the front pocket on the other side. I've gone all the way around. So manipulate your jean, just bring this back together and zip up the zipper. And what I want to check about this point, because the amount that I overlap is just really not that critical. I want it to be 3/8, but if it's a quarter, or, you know, it's just not going to make that much difference. But I do want to make sure that when I bring these into the front, that I want them to be at the same place. So I definitely want that overlap to be exact. So once I've done that, pull that, and then finish up that last little bit. Now I cut my waistband a little bit longer than I needed my waist to be. Once you line it, you can unzip that. And the reason I did that is because I'm going to finish the band. I'm not going to pre-stitch the end of the other band. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off, and then I'm just going to tuck it under. And there's a horizontal stitch at the end of the band, and you'll see that on about every waistband out there. Now that I've told you about it, you'll notice it. And that's because this is the way they are done. They're not a predetermined band size, and I think that's hard for you, some of you, because you want, you know, it to be completely all the pattern pieces done and matching. And we did in the pattern. We did it that way. But I'm saying to you that it's much faster to do it like this, and it's in sewing it allows for a little more error factor. So once I do that, I'm going to turn it vertical, and I'm going to stitch the edge of the band. Sometimes you'll see that even in the front. They don't even do it in the front that way. And then I'm going to go back and pick up the bottom portion. Okay, so I'll show this to you so you can kind of see what I was talking about. And we'll clip this, and we'll clip this. Okay, so here's my band on this particular jean here. This is the part of the selvage where I left at the top. I just thought that was really pretty, and I thought I might as well take advantage of it, so I left that there. On the inside, my band was longer, so I just cut it off, tucked it under, and then you can see I just edge stitched it to hold that in place rather than pre-stitching it like I did this side. Now when I come back right now, what I'm going to do, there's a few little threads there that need to come off, is I'm actually going to finish up the top stitching by doing the horizontal stitch. So the horizontal stitch gets done anyway. It's not a matter of whether you need to, you don't need to finish off this band. I have found that most women have an easier time finishing this off on a sewing machine, turning it and then stitching it rather than just wrapping it like I did on this side. But you can do it either way. It's not a right or a wrong. It doesn't make a difference. What I'm going to do right now is just do the top stitching that goes on the band, and that top stitching I'm going to pick it up right on the edge, and it just goes all the way around. So it is going to be like an edge stitch, just like the bottom of the band. I'm just going to match kind of the bottom of the band, and that literally goes around the top of the band. This is only decorative. There's no function to it at all. The band is done right sides together, so just as I showed you. when I come around to the front, I am going to go ahead and do that top stitching where I didn't have it. I actually did right sides together. So it's up to you if you just want to do the right sides initially, because you'll find in every jean there is this front thing done on here. Okay, what's left? Alright y'all, what's left? Are we done? I want to show you the hem, and we're going to put a little button on there. I won't do the, I always do some like little rivets at the pockets just because I like the way they look. I have some those little grommets that no, they're not grommets, but anyway. When you do a jean hem, I won't do the whole thing, but when you turn it up, you want to do a second row. You want to turn it up twice. So it's about a 1/2 inch wide, and then you should have about a 1/4 inch turned under. The hem itself should be about a 1/2 inch, so you need to leave about 3/4 of an inch for a hem. But what this will cause is over the years, or as you wear your jeans, they'll kind of twist at the bottom. Not twist, that's not the right word, but they'll have a depth to them that will discolor, and that causes that jean bottom that is loved by many. On the waistband overlap, are the edges left raw? No, nothing's left raw, so I'm not sure. Well, let's go back and I can show you. I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm obsessed with my hem here just for a minute. Alright, so I've got all these threads. I told you I was a thread obsessor. Anyway, and let me show you just from the front side what that hem looks like. It does not have it's not double stitched. You probably find a jean out there that is double stitched, but it just is a really nice hem and it looks jeany looking. Okay, on the waistband, what now? Ask that question again, sorry. Is there anything raw? No, this is finished. I used the selvage. That's tucked under on the inside, and that's all tucked. So there should not be anything raw at all. 3/8 of an inch. How far is the jean inserted in? It was 3/8 of an inch. That's why when I was doing it, I was saying, use the part that's turned under. You know how I turned under 3/8 when I was pressing it? Use that portion that's 3/8 because you can look inside and align that portion to the top of the pant. You don't change from the inside. Oh, you mean like on... No, it doesn't change anything. The stitch is the same, top, bottom, it doesn't make a difference. But you want to use the same color on both. You know, you want to use the same color on both. A cover stitch on a jean. I don't use... No, I've not ever seen a cover stitch used on a jean. Okay, so for a buttonhole, you need a buttonhole. So I'm going to put a buttonhole, and then I'm going to put a fly front, or a, I don't know if y'all need to watch me do a buttonhole, or if y'all even feel like you want to watch me put a buttonhole. But I'm going to put a, you know, so I'll do that later. But anyway, here's a buttonhole, and my crew is all gone here for a minute, so if you're arguing, I can't hear it. There's the button. But then I do want you to know about these no-sew buttons. And these are fabulous little puppies. Here, these are the little rivets I was talking about. We have them on the site. They're just those little things, and they look really nice just right there, right there. Sometimes they put them at the edge of the pockets. All those decorations you'll see lots of variations for, so it's all up to y'all what you want to do and how you want to do it. Do a little bit of homework, look around. But this no-sew button, you push it from the, do your buttonhole first, and I do a keyhole buttonhole. So that just means I want the big opening on this side so that the shank will fit through it. All your machines have them. Do a keyhole buttonhole with the biggest end here. It's horizontal. And then once you do that, put them on, and then figure out the best place for the button and put this, it's just as like a little barbed ridge. You just push it through the back side and you push that button on. You actually have to slam it with a hammer. Just a quick bite of the hammer. But what I'm going to do, hey, we actually did this in 3 hours. I'm going to put my pants on, but I'm not putting my pants on in front of you. So I have one leg left to hem. I do have to do that. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go put my pants on and I'll be back. Thanks to you all, I have a new pair of jeans. Alright, so I haven't pressed them all the way. You guys know they're a new pair of jeans. See, I see little threads here. We won't correct any of that. I haven't put my thing on here. But now, you can't criticize circumference because they're the circumference I wanted. And I wanted my jeans not like tight, but a little bit tight. So tell me what you want to see. I know what you want to see. What do you think? I didn't press these, you guys. That's bugging me because I haven't pressed them. But they're the right length because I had all that stuff I predetermined before, in my muslin. So you can see if you take the time and do that in your muslin, you really don't have to try them on in the process. I love the way they fit through the waist. I've got this great little band thing. Now this fabric has a little bit of stretch to it. So, I knew in coming in size, when I was coming in size, that I didn't even really have to worry about movement because it has a little bit of give to it. So it's really, pardon? Go ahead. That's okay, that's okay. I just have enough movement. It doesn't mean they won't wrinkle. Wrinkles are normal, so don't get crazy about wrinkles. And I've got this, see that thread there is bugging me, sorry. Okay. Alright. Watch what, are they saying that? Okay, I know, but let's not. We're just asking questions. We're just going through the questions, you guys. Sorry. They're doing a couple different things back there. So no, if you have any questions in your process, like always, just email me, Peggy@silhouettepatterns.com. Send me a photo if there's something in your muslin fitting that you can't figure out that's right or wrong. Take a picture. You guys know that pictures are what I prefer because a lot of times you misdiagnose the problem, and so if I'm reading along and telling you how to fix something and then we find out it's the wrong problem altogether, it causes you a lot of time. It causes us both a lot of time. So I think the best thing is to just take the photo, send it to me, and let me see them. Okay, I love these back pockets, by the way. They're really, I like back pockets. One thing I've learned on jeans is I don't like jeans without back pockets. So when I decide to not do a patch, I do a welt. It's really the thing to do. Wear them. Those jeans will mold to your body. It's amazing how the fabric just kind of has a memory to it. So they won't necessarily be your favorite in the very beginning, but wear them. Wear them and you'll love them. And you'll see me wearing these all summer because I really like the color, and they're light and I can wear them into fall. They're perfect. Just what I wanted. All right, you all. Anything we can wrap up with? Oh, my top is 113. It's the pattern of the month. Oh, that's right. I didn't even realize that. But I just made it a little while ago. I love this top. It's the one that we did on the webcast, and the fabric is the digital print. It's the French digital print. And I did Sunny's top, but it has a lot of layers, so I doubled the amount of layers. Or I made some thinner, and so instead of just the 4, it's got 7, because I did the top and then I did each 2 more so that I cut it higher off, so that I made, instead of having 3 at the bottom, I have 6 at the bottom. And what that does is it just gives a lot of vertical movement because there's so much movement in the top. I love this top. I really like it. I've worn it a couple times already. The best way to make changes, period, is to not make the changes, is to stitch them in, put them back on, and then once they're on, just reduce the seam allowance down to 3/8 and use that as your pattern. Don't try to go back to the tissue. I only did it today, you guys, so you could, because most of you are using tissue, and so you could see me using the pattern itself. I took my changes back to the pattern, but I would not recommend you do that because I've seen it over and over again in classes where you make errors. You just make errors in taking it back, and there's really no reason. The fabric works really beautifully as a pattern, so I wouldn't try to go back. What I love about these pants is I feel them. They feel so good on. I took all that extra out of underneath the leg here. You can see how nicely they fit. Not that I want to show off my butt on this webcast, but they feel so good. They fit so nice through the butt back here. Anyway, all of that's on that YouTube that we posted last week. So you can kind of go through there and watch that. In the beginning, keep in mind that even though they've only been washed once, the fabric might be a little stiff, so don't get crazy. They'll soften and they'll, do what you want them to do. It doesn't have to be this, well, your muslin should be as close to that original fabric as it can be. When I say muslin, I don't mean muslin. I don't think muslin is a good fabric to use because it's too thin and too lightweight. I used a fabric that I had, it was in a stash, and it was the same stretch and it was a similar weight. So I made my muslin out of that before I did this. Okay. You ready to do jeans? Alright, come on, beat my 3 hours. You can do it. Right? You can do it. I'm going to do my button and buttonhole and then I'm heading on home. I am home. Oh, that's right, I am home. Alright, thanks so much for being here. Thank you for watching. It's for all of you YouTube watchers who have watched us religiously and got us to the 10,000. I hate to tell you, but we're not where we want to be. Our goal is actually now 25,000, and when we get to 25,000, we'll come up with something else fun to reward you all. I feel like I got the reward because I've got the new pair of jeans. But anyway, thanks so much for being here. Our goal is to just make your sewing the best it can be. So from all of us at Silhouette Patterns, happy sewing. Thanks so much. Bye.